Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I'm going to stop these chill jams. Good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to this session. My name is Shauna James. I am TCG's board liaison, and I am so thrilled to be here with you today. I am just here to welcome and say hi on behalf of TCG and just go over a few quick housekeeping items. So first, thank you for joining us. This session has captioning, and you can access the live captioning on the bottom of your screen, the three dots that allow you the option more. You can click to show the transcription. If you have any questions about that, please message me. You can find me in your Zoom chat to just say TCG. Shauna, that's me, would love to chat with you. If you're having any Zoom trouble, anything like that, again, please just feel free to message me. Just a gentle reminder to keep yourself muted when you're not speaking and use the raise hand function if you would like to speak verbally. I just want to let everyone know as well that TCG is recording the full group parts of this session. And I think that is it. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor back to Elena Chang.
Hello, happy Friday. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Elena Chang, she, her, hers, Director of ED&I Initiatives at TCG. I am zooming in from the land of the Lenape, West New York, New Jersey. I have dark brown, mid-length hair, wearing glasses, and orange button-down tank with a blurred background. I'd like to share TCG's land acknowledgement in the chat and encourage you to share your own in the chat. Theater Communications Group's offices are located on the Lenape Island of Mannahatta in Lenapehoking, the Lenape homeland. We honor the generations of stewardship the Lenape people have given to the water, air, and land. As guests, we pay respect to the Lenape peoples, past, present, and future here in their homeland and throughout the Lenape diaspora. Also, while land acknowledgements are important, we recognize that they're just not enough by themselves. Some folks have offered even anti-land acknowledgements. We must also take action in support of Native-led movements for justice. I also want to name the importance of recognizing and supporting the vibrant, expansive ecology of contemporary Native theater that is being made in communities every single day. That being said, today, rather early for those on the West Coast and beyond, on behalf of TCG, we're thrilled to have with us today, and this is a mouthful, but I'm going to go for it, a coalition of Black women professional theater makers, Bay Area Theatre Accountability Workgroup, living document of BIPOC experiences in Bay Area theater and BIPOC equity action plan, and making good trouble. A Forbes piece just last year called One Way Forward from a Cancel Culture to an Accountable Culture. Many folks lately have been calling for accountability in our field, and that could take on many forms, many actions around many issues. And canceling sometimes may be a part of this. But today's session, we are centering Bay Area theater makers who have been working as a community through the lens of change and accountability in their region and our greater national industry. And since we are starting with accountability, I want to manage expectations around time and the culture of urgency, which can be a very real thing, particularly within a predominantly white institution. So it's worth sharing that though the speakers here were hella enthusiastic about reuniting with each other and coming on board to share their practice and organizing with a larger field, this session came together in approximately 3 weeks and will be a little over an hour. Hardly enough time to do justice to years of BIPOC labor in this room. So thank you so much to the speakers for extending your energy and your generosity. Final piece here. Why Bay Area? Well, is there something in the water in the Bay Area? I will share that there will be many more opportunities to continue this conversation and work around accountability in the months and years ahead. I mean, just look at where we are now as a culture and society, a whole other level of reckoning around all of the phobias and the isms. In terms of structure today, we're going to kick it off with brief presentations and a synthesis of respective groups' work. Then we'll transition into our round table and Q&A portion. Thanks so much again, Lauren, Eli, Dawn, Lee, Shannon, Beatrice, and Sonia. Super happy to have Coalition of Black Women Professional Theater Makers kick this off. So shall we, Lauren?
Thank you so much, Anna. So I'm so happy to be here with all of you and to share space with my lovely compatriots. My name is Lauren Spencer. I use she, her pronouns, she, her, hers. And I live in San Francisco, which is Ohlone Ramaytush land, but I'm currently zooming in from my place of birth, Philadelphia, which is unceded Lenape land, and honoring all of the still existing tribes that occupy and live and steward this land, because sometimes in land acknowledgements we speak about it as if they are a thing of the past and they are very present. I am representing a coalition of Black women that came together in 2016. It was 13 women in response to a production, Thomas and Sally, that was produced by Marin Theater Company. The coalition basically represented a cross-section of community members in the Bay Area, theater goers, artists, theater makers, those who choose to make theater making their sole profession, those who choose to diversify. Diversity was a core aspect of us coming together. It's a very complex history that we're coming from. I'm going to pop a link to our original open letter into the chat for anyone who is interested in doing more research, if you aren't aware of the letter, but I'll give a high level introduction. Thomas and Sally was a production that was commissioned by MTC prior to 2017 when it was produced. I had been part of the developmental reading, as had several other actors who are in the coalition. The short of it is that the method of commissioning, producing, rehearsing, and developing that production caused a lot of trauma and harm within not only the artist community, but within the larger BIPOC community within the Bay Area. Some of the events that happened included calling the police on a group of Black women who were demonstrating their concern and discontent peaceably on the parking lot in front of the theater. Some of the actors being spoken to in difficult and traumatic ways by some of the staff, having inappropriate costuming for patrons to try on in the restrooms, posting pictures of Sally hemming above urinals, things of this nature, which are detailed in our letter. What I think is most important, and I am very present to my concern and the coalition's concern of what it means to move forward in action, right? This happened in 2017, and there could be an impulse to rehash and sit in the trauma of that moment. However, there has been a journey, as there has been with all movements, and so focusing on lifting up the action of the women that I worked with and that we worked together in concert rather than the trauma, I think is where I'd like to position this introduction. What happened was really organic. And I think what's important to understand about the coalition is that we came together to respond to a specific instance of harm, to specific relationships that were causing harm without an idea that it had to persist beyond that moment, and that there is value in that organic grassroots nature of independent artists and artists that work with an institution to come together, that all of those voices exist together and can impact our communities and create change. So we gathered together one night and talked about how we were going to respond. Initially, it was just going to be a conversation with the theater that was going to be in private. And then there was an investment by the theater at the time in a carceral action against Regina's Door, which were the women who were protesting the play peaceably. And it ended in this open letter, which stated many of the things that have resurfaced through many actions over the years, including the We See You letter, including the Living Doc, which I know Eli will talk about, and including letters and actions that existed before us. I think what was deeply important was in having conversations, all of us, with artists and makers around the Bay Area, was understanding that these movements live in nexus. We are constellations that coexist there. I want to lift up the MENA letter that came under the stewardship of Taranj of Golden Thread, as well as other folks that talked about Middle Eastern representation that happened a few years before us. And there are many letters and efforts before that. And that seems important because it can feel like you're in a vacuum. Part of coalition was how do we build these relationships that hold us as Black women, as BIPOC folks in these moments, and how do we build strength together to know that we can steward our own futures and our own paths. What we also learned from releasing this letter and having the community come together, we entered and attempted an accountability process with the MTC, which is still ongoing and has taken a long time. And as we've seen with many PWIs, the initial response was very defensive. And then there was the response of, yes, we've taken action, here is our surface level apology, and then nothing. We had hired accountability, restorative justice practitioners. They reported back to us in 2018 that they decided to divest from the process because they didn't believe that the theater was acting in good faith. And then we're in the George Floyd's murder, the uprisings of last summer and the pandemic, and suddenly we're in these conversations again. So thinking about how equity, diversity, and inclusion can be used as a tool by PWIs to hide, to leverage what is useful to them now, especially that it's being commodified as part of business. And I'm sure we'll talk about capitalism at some point. It has its dangers. Now, MTC is still in process. Post last summer, they have been posting accountability plans, which had been asked for originally in the letter. And so that process is still ongoing. But there's really been a shift to focus on what it means for the coalition to support other artists of color and POC, BIPOC focused efforts, communities, arts makers, and companies. And then the last thing I want to lift up is that in terms of allyship, because I know not everyone out there is going to be a BIPOC human but how you can actually be an ally or a co-conspirator, I want to lift up Barge, which is another offshoot that came out of this work, which Mina Morita, who is the artistic director of Product Fire, had contacted us, the coalition, and said, we really want to help after last summer. And the coalition had felt very strongly that we need to pass this on to white folks. Basically, they need to take care of this problem. You need to call your people in and take on that responsibility. And so Barge was created for white identifying theater practitioners who wanted to take on the labor of continuing to hold MTC and other theaters accountable in a way that is about maintaining relationships and transforming relationships, which is really, I think, what the coalition's ultimate intention was behind the letter. I'm sure we'll talk more about that, but I would love to pass it on to my friend Eli.
Thanks, Lauren. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. My name is Eli Sunny Ortiza, and I'm a theater maker here in San Francisco Bay Area. My pronouns are he, him, his. I'm an Asian American of a darker complexion with almond eyes. I currently wear a mustache and a thick coarse hair, and I'm wearing a brown puffer jacket. Behind me is a blurred background of my living space. I want to take time and acknowledge that we all gather as a community on the traditional lands of native peoples and the land that enslaved Black people have built, as well as a country that immigrants from all over the world have culturally enriched. I acknowledge the elders and the leaders of these communities, past, present, and emerging, with gratitude and respect. And I am tuning in from the territory of the Ramaytush Ohlone people, colonially known as San Francisco. Today, I will be talking to you about the living document. And let me just share my screen very briefly, or actually.
Shauna has your slides ready, Eli.
Alrighty. Shauna, if you don't mind pulling that presentation for me, that would be great. Thank you. Great. So what is the living document? The living document of BIPOC experiences in the Bay Area theater communities is a 175 pages document detailing the community, decrying the insidious ways theaters and individual street artists of color. It outlines the grievances and the profound grief of the community that range from verbal and institutional racism to cultural appropriation and cultural incompetency, and even to abuse and tokenism. Slide 2. The living document's original intention was to chronicle the extent of white supremacy that is omnipresent in our industry through firsthand experiences and self-submitted testimonies from the Bay Area artists. And it really also calls for a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive theater community that fully affirms and celebrates all artists, especially BIPOC artists. As a background on how this document came to be, on June 6, 2020, in response to the Bay Area's companies issuing Black Lives Matter solidarity statement in recognition of the nationwide uprising following the murder of George Floyd, I asked friends and colleagues on my Facebook page, as a POC artist, what white nonsense have you experienced in the theater? This prompted folks to share vulnerably about their personal experiences. And then 3 days later, on June 9th, 2020, I created a Google document and made it publicly accessible to the Bay Area community, which became the living document, and it garnered over 600 testimonies of and anecdotal evidences within 72 hours, ranging from racist comments, humiliation, exploitation, anti-Blackness, and many isms that is prevalent and present in our community out here in San Francisco Bay Area. While each of these testimonials stand on its own, together they offer critical themes and takeaways that the living document summarize. Some of the themes and takeaways are that anti-Blackness manifests in our industry in countless ways, ranging from racist caricatures and assumptions around Black people, and Black characters of feedback around Black bodies, voices, faces, skin, attitude, personalities. And these behaviors include, casting Black men purely in violent roles, casting Black bodies as detention kids, and in some cases using N-word in rehearsal spaces. And really, BIPOC, another summary that we kind of collated, and these are all available on the Living Documents website, is that when BIPOC artists who are self-identifying as non-binary, transgender, non-conforming, young, and or disabled, they experience intersecting vulnerabilities and particularly harmful behavior in the Bay Area. This document lists numerous accounts of women enduring misogynistic treatment from white men, non-binary, trans, and non-gender conforming individuals being misgendered, excluded, harmed, in cis hetero patriarchal spaces, disabled artists fighting repeatedly for access needs to be met, and young artists being targeted as prey for sexual harassment and emotional manipulation. Again, the full list of the breakdown is on the Living Documents website. Could you go back a little bit? There you go, thank you. Let me just read that for you all. So a few themes and takeaways, and the impact to the Living Documents creates ranging, sorry, go to the next slide, my bad. So the key demands of the BIPOC living document, there's really 8 summary that we kind of came at into the framework. 1, acknowledging the structures and histories of harm to better inform the forward progress. 2, end harmful practices, programs, and contracts with individuals with a history of problematic and racist behaviors. 3, offer transparency into finances and decision-making to build trust and increase accountability. Build resource and sustain intentional pipelines into and throughout the industry, focus on diversifying the fields. Diversify content of programming to celebrate underrepresented artists, intentionally recruit, meaningfully include, gainfully employ, and actively support underrepresented artists ranging from content creation to consulting to designing to performing. Ensure board demographics, values, and decisions reflect the demographics of the communities that they serve and the overall region, with specific attention to race, ethnicity, gender, and other identifiers. And last, resource and invest in historically marginalized communities. You can check out the Living Documents website and read the community's testimonies, check out the action plan, and also send in your personal testimonies as well if you are in our region. So that's a little bit about the Living Document, and I'm going to pass it on to the accountability group.
Shannon, jump in.
Thank you. Bonjour, hello. My name is Shannon R Davis. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am zooming in from San Rafael, California, which is the unceded traditional land of the Miwok coastal people. I have long black hair and beaded earrings. I'm mixed race, indigenous, native, and white. And I'm sitting on a kind of a ornate throne, as I like to call it, with a white background. And while I have a captive audience, I wanted to take a moment to lift up the West Berkeley shell mounds, which are endangered at the moment. They're possibly going to be paved over to build low-income housing, which is also very important, but they are a sacred site to the Ohlone people. So if you visit shellmound.org, you can learn more about them. Thank you, Lee, for dropping those links in the chat. Also, Idle No More SF Bay will give you more information on that. We're actually going to be gathering and protesting today after this and could really use national support posting it and getting the message out. Actually, the National Trust for Historic Preservation names this as the 11th most endangered historic place in the United States. So it's very important that we help our Ohlone community. Thank you for that. And yeah, Lee, please.
Hi, y'all. My name is Lee Rondon Davis. My pronouns are they, them, theirs. I am a medium-skinned, non-binary Black femme. I'm wearing clear cat-eyed glasses, a silk scarf wrapped around my hair, which is in a short natural afro. I'm wearing a green cozy sweater and a gold pendant. I'm sitting in my dining area with artifacts and a carefully curated wall of art and trinkets and cherished items behind me on shelves. And I am a seed team organizing member of the Bay Area Theatre Accountability Workgroup. I am also, you'll hear about it later, one of the inaugural cohort members of the Making Good Trouble program, and I'll pass it off to Dawn.
Hey everybody, I'm Dawn Monique Williams. I use she, her, hers pronouns. I too am on ancestral Ohlone lands. I was born here in Oakland, so I am of Ohlone lands, and I am working hard to give the land back to the Ohlone people who are stewarding this land. So I'm just gonna bump up Shannon's thing about the shell mounds. Any support that you can offer or show to our local community here is much appreciated. I'd like to say I'm a honey brown skinned Black woman with shoulder length natural curly hair. I do wear glasses. I didn't think what shape they are as as my sibling Lee has done. I'm in a peach colored shirt, but it really matches my skin. So that makes my honey brown contradictory to my peach shirt, but maybe it's just my lights. I am in front of a virtual background of a Tudor mansion. It happens to be the Allen Elizabethan stage at the Oregon Shakespeare Festival. And I am one of the inaugural SEED team members of the Bay Area Accountability Workgroup, which started just about a year ago, informed by the Bay Area Living Document, informed by the We See You White American Theater document. And there was a group of artistic leaders, managing directors, artistic directors meeting in the Bay Area to discuss issues of Bay Area sustainability around the pandemic at the time of George Floyd's murder. And some leaders in that group, Mina Morita, Eric Ting, felt it necessary for that group to also be discussing Black liberation. And they looked around the room and realized that there was a striking absence of BIPOC representation at that leadership level. So they set about the task of recruiting BIPOC folks and other accomplices to join that group. So, so my friends here that you see on the screen with me, while we do not hold positions of institutional power, we are among the thought leaders in our theater community, and we're brought on board to help bring this group forward. And that then has split into two sort of channels. So there is still a group of artistic directors and managing directors that meet to talk about like pandemic stuff. And then there is a large group of varies week to week between 50 and 80 people who participate in a bi-weekly work group where we have a learning space and an action space. And I'll see if Shannon and Lee want to augment those things that I have offered. Great.
I can share a little bit about what we've been moving through.
Please.
We, as a SEED team, have been coming up with different cadences and as Dawn shared, ways for folks, our community members to learn. And we are all active participants in this learning. So different SEED team members sort of take on that week or 2 weeks cadence of gathering panelists, gathering resources, curating discussion questions. And then we share that with the group. And it's sort of this back and forth flow. Like we call ourselves the SEED team. We are hosts, not necessarily facilitators, because we are also equal learners in this journey. We have many, many things that we can and have offered to the group, but we also invite accountability work group members to help lead sections, to be panelists, to offer things for the group. And so it is sort of like this community resource and information exchange. You know, something that we are thinking about right now is that, interestingly, the SEED team has the largest sort of percentage or ratio of BIPOC members. We are predominantly BIPOC leaders. We have a handful of amazing white allied folks and accomplices that are also supporting in the organizing, but that's not necessarily representative of the full accountability work group. And we're recognizing that a lot of BIPOC folks are putting in a lot of labor right now to educate and bring white folks or predominantly white institutions along. And we're recognizing that we're tired. We've been doing this for a year and we're ready to pass the mantle on to our white colleagues who should have been listening and learning and growing with us. And so we're looking at starting a BIPOC space out of this accountability work group specifically for BIPOC community members, BIPOC theater leaders, BIPOC freelance artists who are leaders in our community of their own right, so that we can center our energy around and bolster, sustain, and support our BIPOC community. Shannon, do you want to add anything?
Just that it's been lovely to be a part of this this group that's constantly reevaluating within the SEED team as well, how we sit in community with our colleagues from predominantly white institutions and constantly reevaluate our own white supremacist tendencies and capitalistic tendencies. Having a lot of conversations about what mutual aid could look like in our community. I think that's all I wanted to add. You two did beautifully.
And I will just follow up by speaking to the sort of overlapping of the groups Lee named, that they are part of the Making Good Trouble. Lauren, who led us off today, had been a foundational member of the SEED team. Sonia, who you're going to hear from in just a moment, is also a current member of the SEED team. So it's a very kind of nutritious, cross-fertilized group of theater makers and thought leaders doing this work here in the Bay Area. And with that, and noting the time, I'm going to hand it off to Sonia and Beatrice to talk about Making Good Trouble.
Hi, everyone. I'll start, Beatrice, and then you can introduce yourself, and then maybe we jump into that. Okay. I'm trying to hold my hero, Adrienne Marie Brown's less prep, more presence. Sonia Fernandez, she, her, hers. I am, I think the having everyone be from the Bay Area is lovely because of hearing so many different land acknowledgements, but I'm also on Ramaita Sholoni land. I am in my dining room / office. I am a light-skinned Latina woman, and I am prone to smiling, especially in this group of people, and nodding. And so at the end of this, my face is gonna hurt. I have dark black glasses and dark sort of wavy hair with some grays that have been exacerbated by this last year. My background is a dark blue wall with some art, also carefully curated, and some of my plants that I love. And yeah, I'll pass it to Beatrice.
Howdy doody. Hi, I'm just going to pull up my notes so I don't forget anything. My name is Beatrice Lillian Thomas, named for my grandmothers, both. Beatrice, grandmother on mom's side, Lillian, grandmother on father's side. Say their name. My organization is Authentic Arts and Media. My pronouns are they and she. I am currently wearing a very nice felt hat in a fedora-like shape. I have what I would like to call very large circular glasses with a black rim on my face. I'm sporting a sort of dreadlocked bob with kind of a Rick James bang, I have a sort of MC Escher bird blazer on, a navy blue collared shirt, so I mean business. And I was trying to figure out how to describe my skin tone other than brown. I am brown, but I'd like to say that more than that, like I am a skin tone that is shared by so many people. It's multi-hued. It's hard to define. It is gold in the sunlight. It can be red in the shadows. It can be deep purple. At night, I am from a rich tradition of something that is more alive than just brown. So I will say a Black multi-ethnic African-American non-binary woman. The woman is for my Black womanhood. It will not stop. And it's important for me to let you know that I am West African, North African, Irish, Scottish, Welsh, Japanese, Korean, and Indigenous Amazonian. Because I feel so many of the people who come to this country are forced to assimilate into a box that is not expansive enough for anyone. So thank you for that. My company, Authentic Arts and Media, operates in a couple of ways. The first way being doing consulting with organizations to dismantle systemic oppression in our institutions, to trainings and workshops to help individuals unlearn the racism and prejudice and that we have all internalized, so that we can start to shift the culture both inside and outside of our organizations. And finally, creative production, right? I produce BIPOC, queer, trans, and social justice aligned projects, because when we get to the point where we have reached equity, I plan to be ready with artists to just ascend to the equitable place in the arts world, in the diaspora. So I think it's important. You got to keep developing the artists so that when the infrastructure is ready, because we're gonna be ready to slay. All right. I think that really covers it. My land acknowledgement lives in the fact, I think about the fact that I have been removed from a land, and I actually have no indigenous roots to this country. And then I think about the ways in which colonization and the design of racism has been meant to pit communities against each other. And so my land acknowledgement is coming from someone who was robbed of land. And to say that I heard a story, my people are from, my mother is from Florida, and the land of the Timucuan in Callahan, Florida. And the stories that really resonate with me and keep me focused on my path and my business on its path is that when in the antebellum South, right, slaves ran from slavery. And in Florida, in particular, there was a community called the Marooners, and they lived in the swamps of Florida. And it is through the cross-cultural collaboration. I learned the story from Carmen Morgan in her Surviving White Institution session. So just like give props. But it was through that cross-cultural collaboration that the skills were learned to survive and thrive in that environment. But also there were slaves still on the plantation, living in those institutions, working in those institutions, that were meeting under the cover of night to pass broken tools, old clothes, shoes over the fence so that people could thrive and survive. And so for me, I live in that place, which is I need our institutions to come along, but I also need to be creating a place for people to go to once they are tired from the institution. And we have to have the exchange. We have to have the exchange of resources to be able to build to equivalence. So that's what I'm working towards. And that's what I'm all about. Thank you. Did I get it all?
I love that. Being in Beatrice's presence these past months has just been a joy. I'm gonna quickly go over the slides, Shauna, of what Making Good Trouble is. You get a sense just from hearing Beatrice, who is our awesome facilitator.
I didn't do a good job of saying that.
What?
I didn't do a good job of saying that. I can follow up after.
We could go to the next slide. So Making Good Trouble, and I really appreciate the way that these introductions have sort of named the lineage, because really this was about conversations, or it started with conversations within the beginning of the Accountability Workgroup seed team, and with myself, who was then interim artistic director of Magic Theater, and Mina Morita, who's the artistic director of Crowded Fire, where I'm also a long time resident artist, thinking about like, how could we create something that will provide resources to our community. And so, Shauna, I can't see the whole of the slide because I'm seeing, maybe I need to change my view.
Well, I actually think that I'm going to go back and just, sorry, a little real-time tech moment. I'm going to reshare my screen and just have it, and just try to make this a bit bigger. I think the words are just a little cut off in the box, and so it may just be easier to look at it like this. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
Great. Thanks so much.
And so the partners were Magic Theater, Crowded Fire, and Playwrights Foundation. And we started dreaming what this framework could be. We applied for funding from the National New Play Network, and we got it, and then had to like make a program. And we launched it in February after an application process. And the structure of it is that there are, and Authentic Arts and Media came on, earlier in the fall, before the application process, and that is Beatrice's company. And so we have 20 members of the cohort, of which Lee and Eli are members, that meet 3 times a month for 3 hours each for a combination of, I think Beatrice can talk more about this, but learning and like facilitation learning, in order to train folks up to be anti-racist trainers in the community. And I love the way Beatrice put it earlier this week about training up warriors of liberation. Like that is the idea. And we can go to the next slide, I think. The idea is a couple of things. Funding sources for artists to do this work. Artists, some of whom were already doing the work. Training and how to do it in a sustainable practice. And at the end, the hope is that the cohort will go out and work at various institutions to lead this kind of training. And in that way, like spread learning and spread liberation. And also sort of a byproduct of that is a shared community within the cohort and that kind of nourishment that I have felt happening within that. And towards like transformation of our community, of our like badass, hella awesome theater community in the Bay Area. And so that's just sort of the outline of what the program is. And we're right in the middle of it now. There are like 6 months of this like sort of rigorous training, and then monthly meetings after that that are more like check-ins, coaching, and things like that. Did I miss anything, Beatrice?
I don't think so. I think that the only thing that I would offer is that a reflection on the process of making and the engagement of emergent strategy. Thank you, Adrienne Marie Brown. This has been, it's a collective of theaters came together to make impact across the Bay. We decided emergent strategy would be our practice. There have been a lot of learnings in that, because one of the things that I have learned is how colonized we all are to the expectations that things will be kind of served up for us, right? And so our desire for structure, our desire for order. But this is a time of disorder, and we need to take advantage of it. So constantly reaffirming that it's okay that we don't know. It's okay that you can apply your own insight to it to move it forward for you. So there was a lot of tension at points where it was like, I don't know where we are and I don't know where we're going. And I'm like, I can't really give you a clear answer on that, because it's emerging and it's developing over time. And so we have seen now in that midpoint that I think there is more trust that's been built. We have a clear understanding of now, oh, if I want something to change, I need to speak up, say it. And also that we are redistributing labor, right? That we're just like, okay, how can we make this happen with the labor that we have assembled here? Let's think about that. Those are the kinds of conversations that I believe are kind of really key and critical in this collection of people. And not everyone's going to go out and try to make bank, right? Some are just trying to work within their organizations, and that deserves to be funded as well. So I just wanted to share a bit about that journey. It's messy, and we have to have a process that allows for messy and slow. And yet here we are tromping along, and I think people have really expanded in what they know. So I just wanted to offer that up. Right, thank you.
And I'll toss it back to Elena to get us started on our questions and roundtable-ness.
Oh my goodness. So much here. I mean, it's messy, so much labor, where is the funding? We're going to be a little bit emergent with the remaining time that we have here. Now that you've shared a bit on organizing frameworks, let's take a few minutes of open conversation with a couple of questions, including from participants. I just want to relift the community agreement, make space and take space. I get that we have a handful of amazing white ally folks on this call, but I do want to request that non-BIPOC folks hold back on initial questions so we're truly able to center BIPOC attendees in this space. Any questions that we do not get to, I will be sure to follow up with our lovely speakers here to provide additional resources and responses. So I want to acknowledge that there are intersections in how we show up in this work. There's personal, there's professional, there's certainly civic and community engagement. So speakers, feel free to address these questions, not necessarily on behalf of your collective and organization, but also from your individual, beautiful human self. So, you know, I've had the pleasure of getting to know you a little bit, but I just wanted to bring that up. So before we take questions from folks while we're in this gallery mode, let's kick it off with something light. And then we could get into funding, how it plays a part, and different strategies. So this is open to the group. Anyone feel free to pop in with a hand. What does accountability look like to you as an individual? And what should it look like?
I'm gonna give y'all some time to think of your answers, right? That's what I'm doing. And I will say that I do practice the 2 before you rule. So I'm going now, and then I will be waiting for 2 people before I speak again. But I wanted to say that
I love it. Love it.
like, what does accountability look like to me? I mean, I just would like to say it looks like open dialogue with lots of check-ins. It's a lot of asking and offering and sharing and inviting. Like, I think it's a shift of language. Like the sort of business language does not work when it just doesn't work. We have to honor, offer, share, right? And then I would say the last is like, it's humility, right? It's humility in the work, in acknowledging the work that you still have to do, the work that exists, acknowledging when you don't know something, when you are stumped and you can't really move forward, acknowledging all of it with a humble heart, and also a learning posture. Many people don't know how to sit in a learning posture, because we think leadership means up and above or something. But like, prostrate yourself to the learning that people have to share with you. It doesn't matter if they're 5 years old or 55 or older. Prostrate yourself to that learning. Get into the posture of experiencing something new, and sit and receive. That's what I feel like it looks like to me.
Who's after this one? Oh, let's have Sonia and then Eli.
I resonate with a lot of that, Beatrice. Also, just what's resonating for me too is like showing up as my authentic self and really being aware of the moments when I'm not. And part of that is like owning my power in spaces, which I think for a long time I kind of shrank away from that. And, you know, imposter syndrome is real. And really stepping up in that way. And I think about accountability as very personal, and also the way that that ripples out, the way that the small can manifest in great ways. And I love that posture of learning. I also just think about curiosity, like approaching things with curiosity whenever friction points emerge, really trying to understand. So that's what I'll throw in there.
Thank you, Sonia. Eli?
Yeah, for me, accountability is really an act of love and care. It's an all the time, ongoing personal ownership and initiative journey. following your responsibility for and willingness to own the outcome of your decisions and actions. I think this happens both in an individual and organizational level. I think when you're looking to hold people accountable, you really can't play favorites, right? You can't let it slide with some people that you know and love and say, oh, that's only going to happen once. I'm not going to do that. I think accountability has to be consistently requested of people, everyone, and it needs to happen all the time.
Dawn, Lauren, Lee.
Yeah, I saw that Lauren had her hand up, so I cede the floor to her before I speak.
Great.
I just wanted to thank you, John. I just wanted to underline what everyone else said. I think so much of what I was thinking has already been named, but I think about an active practice of creative contention, right? Like, what does it mean? And the contention is, to Sonia's point, what I have learned on my journey is that there is contention that is outward and replicates the same violence I am protesting. And then there's contention that is helmed by vulnerability. And like, what does it actually mean to sit with myself, and what am my internalized isms and how I am putting that onto the world, and to focus on how I am creating the reality among my folks and my communities that I want to see expand. So Dawn, I'll pass to you.
It's, for me, it's a yes and to everything that everybody's said. And at a very personal level for me, I mean, I love that Sonia used the word authentic self, because this is something I really struggle with, because I do not yet believe that as a queer brown woman, I can show up in a lot of spaces my authentic self. So I've learned to frame this in terms of integrity. So for me, it's about behaving with integrity. And then I do maintain that expectation of other people. So, so that's my question, is like, are you behaving with integrity? And I've learned for me that to be behaving with integrity requires a lot of care. I love that we've used that word already, a lot of thought. It requires active practice. We said that, active practice. To really strive to be meticulous with my words. And it's been a great thing as part of this accountability work group that we keep coming back to. What is the definition of accountability? What is the desired outcome of all the work that we're doing? And what is a measure of success for accountability? And that is, I'm finding, a constantly sort of like moving target. But yes, and to all of these things.
Great. Thank you so much, Dawn. Lee, Shannon, did you have anything to offer here?
Yeah, I just, as always, these beautiful people that I get to work with all the time have said it best. I don't have much to add other than just a little bit what I heard from Dawn. You mentioned some being impeccable with your word. It's not exactly how you put it, but just that ancient Toltec wisdom of being true to yourself and being true to a space. And one thing I'll add from my personal experience is realizing that by being accountable, I don't have to dissect myself from the complexities of what I am as a person, as a representative of an institution, as someone that feels very intersectional in my own identity. I can bring that complexity to every space that I'm in and just sit in my own imperfection and be ready to be messy there in the work, listening and bringing love to each space that I'm in.
Thank you.
Everything that's been shared for me is I echo all of it. I will say that also, I think for me, accountability is like constant. There is no end point. Like, we are always holding ourselves and those around us accountable. But I think accountability like starts with me, what starts with the individual. I'm going to speak from my own perspective, but like, it is my responsibility to be accountable to the communities that I navigate, the communities that I'm serving in my professional life, the communities that I am like actively a member of because of my identities or where I live and the things that I do. And I think that accountability on that personal level looks a lot like checking the ways we've internalized white supremacy and anti-Blackness and xenophobia, right? Even though we don't believe in these things, we don't want to stand for these things, we have internalized them. And so for me, it's a constant internal assessment of like, how am I disrupting my own thought patterns around these things? And how am I like constantly in like, again, the practice and the position of learning and listening, and then doing. Like, I think sometimes accountability can stop at the learning and listening for some folks because they're not sure what to do. They're overwhelmed by what to do. They're told that, you know, this is your time to listen to others. But the work still needs to happen. And maybe you're not the one out in front leading that work, but you're doing internal work, or you're doing work supporting as opposed to being in the front, right? And so like on a personal level, I think that's what accountability can, should, and does look like for me.
Thank you.
Can I add something, Elena?
Sure.
I just want to, because I find when we all talk about this, there's language that I use myself and that I hear about, you know, about leadership. And to Lee's beautiful point, you know, as someone who worked with a coalition of people who did not have positional power, I really invite us to interrogate, like, and recreate, what does power mean? What does it mean to be out front? Out front can be in the back, out front can be below, out front can be to the side. And that you are leading through, like so many people said here, through your personal example, through your public example, through your work, however microcosmic or macrocosmic it is. And that for me, also accountability is, how do we revision what leadership means and expand our understanding of what the practice of leadership looks like as it exists within and without institutions.
Wonderful. Thank you. I mean, I am really feeling so much love and light across this group of speaker squares already. Way to really light up this Friday. We have a couple of minutes left, and I would really love for us to take some questions from the BIPOC attendees here. There will be an opportunity to add your email and contact information in the chat in a moment. I already have a question that was brought to me privately, so I'll start there. And for all the participants out there, if you have a pressing thought or a question, please feel free to put it in the chat and I can tee it up. So we got this one. Have you ever been exhausted and tired, in all caps, with this particular labor? And what have you done to reset or recalibrate? That's only one question, so not everybody needs to answer, but I saw a lot of head nods and smiling.
I mean, I am constantly exhausted. I am tired right now. I'm doing this panel and then I'm going into a long full day of Zoom days, moving through PWIs. I am constantly tired. And I think that's something that we've been talking about as the seed team in the Bay Area Theatre Accountability Workgroup, is like, many of us BIPOC folks are feeling tired. We have just spent the last year in various states of educating, supporting, literally dragging along at times members of our community just so that we can be seen and heard and valued and respected and taken care of, right? And so, you know, I don't want to speak for other seed team members, but it has come up in our conversations of like, yeah, we're tired and we've been putting a lot of energy into this full accountability work group, which is just by the demographics of our community, has been a predominantly white space. And now we're interested in taking that energy and putting it directly into our BIPOC communities. And so, you know, one thing that I have experienced, and I think others have experienced, is like when we're in seed team meetings, that it's such a comfort. It doesn't feel like a meeting. It feels like a reunion. It feels like, you know, lunch after your least favorite class in high school, you know? And so many of us see each other in a number of spaces. So there's like a real community and kinship and relationship there. So I think for me, I have been able to sort of recuperate in those kinds of spaces where I know that these are folks that are deeply engaged in the work that that I see myself in and that they see themselves in me. And I also think that like setting boundaries is like the biggest part. I have now, like, it took me so long, you know, I've been a professional theater maker for almost 10 years now, not quite. I'm definitely on the younger side. But it like earlier on in my career, I couldn't say like, you know what, that's not my job, or like, I need you to do some work first before you even come to me with that, or like, what you said is out of pocket and I don't have the energy, or it is not my job to tell you why. I'm going to tell you that it was disrespectful. I'm going to tell you that it was harmful, and that's labor enough, and you need to go do your work. And so I think a combination of finding spaces in which you can be fulfilled and in community in a reciprocal way, looking at the spaces that are giving you things, filling your cup and not just constantly taking from you, and then setting those lines for yourself, I think is has been tools for me to like recuperate and sit back. Yeah.
I mean, I've been seeing some activity in the chat with boundaries. Lauren, you mentioned being able to say no. And that is such a real thing. Whatever you have to do to conserve that energy, so that energy could be directed towards your own communities. And there's a sense of entitlement, right? Like when folks are not in the know, I mean, what if you had a business card that said like, you know, you really disrespected me, go and do your work, right? So that it's not expected of you to explain what happened and what the learning is, right? Sonia, I want to go to you, and I also see a lot of other questions, so I want to be able to at least hit one more. And participants, note that I am tracking the questions. There'll be a moment where you can put your email in the chat, okay? Sonia?
Just really quickly, I wanted to say something about that this collaborative model, this like collaborative leadership model also allows for us to hold each other up, but also to allow folks to step back if they need to not be at some of those meetings, because like I have 2 kids and they are a drain and they are a source. But that something about like the charismatic leader model actually allows for a longer sustained practice. Go, Beatrice.
I knew you were gonna do that. Beatrice, you're up. And then I do want to offer this question.
Okay, I will be quick. But to just speak to what Lee is saying, that like things are shifting. We're seeing like energies. BIPOC folks are like, you know what, funk this, F-U-N-K, okay? Funk this. We are going to coalesce around these issues and try to figure out how we can do it on our own. We still need resources. There is still a resource drain, like when we look at funding, when we look at how theaters, you know, organize their resources, that make it challenging to build our own institutions is one. But I also think as we are in these institutions, learning and trying to move things forward, it is actually the responsibility of the institution to provide a workspace that is free from harassment and aggression so that you can do the job you were hired to do. And so what's shifting now, what you're seeing is that people are like, oh, right, it's not on me. And so what I think, Lee, what you're saying is brilliant, but I would also say that you can march yourself right into the authority above you to say, this is going on, this happened, here's the hurt, here's the harm, how do you plan to deal with that? And you can let me know, keep me in the loop, bye, right? That this isn't, we are hired to do jobs. And part of the reasons that we leave or there's challenges is because of all of this other stuff that is around accountability and like the daily environmental stressors, otherwise known as microaggressions, that accumulate over time. So we need recourse. We have not had recourse. And so now we are seeing with this conversation around accountability, some empowerment to say, racism is not our problem. We acknowledge we have to work on it. But what are you going to do? Because I'm not going to do your labor for you.
I mean, is that the end of the session then? I am not going to do the labor for you. Could we rename our title for this, the Bay Area version? Oh my goodness.
But that's a misnomer. That,
Yeah.
you know, we are going to do the labor regardless because we are ambitious, creative people who must make, right? And we must find a way to create and make. So I just get into it, y'all. We got to find ways to do this together. They're like,
maybe this is a segue. I have a couple of questions here, and I don't want to rush in terms of those responses. Maybe we do have to explore better ways of working together. You know, a couple of these questions were around collective organizing on a national front. Before we close, please, if you are interested in being on a contact list, please put your email and your name in the chat right now. We will follow up with some responses to the questions that came in later, as well as provide notes from the session and slides as they are available. It's really been a joy getting to know you all a bit in this organizing of this session. Thank you again to these incredible accountability organizers from the Bay with, as Dawn mentioned, I think you said nutritious and cross-fertilized relationships, right? Special thanks to Eric Ting and Nina Morita for lifting these organizations and individuals, supporting the curation of this space. Definitely more to come. Again, continue to please pop in your email addresses and your names. We'll certainly follow up with the speakers. Can we all just unmute ourselves and show some love? Thinking about the incredible labor as well as the love and the abundance and joy. Hopefully some of this energy from the Bay Area can trickle into wherever we are with the Zoom squares. Feeling your love and your light, truly. Thank you so much. Beatrice, Dawn, Lauren, Sonia, Eli, Lee, Shannon. Have a wonderful, beautiful rest of the week. There's a
shout out to the Making Good Trouble cohort in the audience.